The air recyclers on Helios Spindle Station always tasted of ozone-burnt coffee and the collective anxiety of 10,000 travelers. It was a cocktail of scents that Leora Cade had breathed for 5 years, and it sat heavy in her lungs. She adjusted the collar of her uniform, the stiff fabric chafing against the sensitive skin of her neck. Being half Helian and half human meant she had the pale, iridescent complexion of her mother's people, but the stubborn, square jaw of her father's. It also meant she had the endurance to sit in a security booth for 12 hours straight, watching the galaxy file past her one biometric scan at a time. Zone 4 of the immigration sector was a chaotic river of biology and technology. To her left, a family of crustacean-like Vraxian merchants was arguing with a drone about the import tax on dried kelp. To her right, a diplomat from the core worlds was loudly demanding expedited clearance, waving a platinum chip at a sensor that clearly did not care about his social standing. Overhead, the announcement system droned on in 6 different languages, reminding everyone that possession of unregistered plasma weaponry carried a mandatory sentence of 20 cycles in the cryo prison. Leora sighed, tapping her fingers on the haptic interface of her console. The glass partition in front of her was smeared with the grease of 1,000 foreheads and tentacles. Next, she said, her voice projected by the speaker system, stripping it of any emotion. A towering, 4-armed laborer from the mining colonies shuffled forward. He smelled of sulfur and engine grease. Leora went through the motions, her hands moving with the muscle memory of a pianist playing a song she hated. Scan the retina. Check the pulse variance. Verify the travel permit, stamp, approve. Next. It was the same routine day after day. The spindle was the gateway to the Orion Coalition, the needle through which the thread of galactic commerce had to pass. Since the end of the Nixian War 15 years ago, the traffic had only increased. The Coalition was terrified of another conflict, so they buried everyone in paperwork. Security was tight, paranoid, and exhausting. Leora rubbed her temples. She glanced at the time projected on her retina display. 3 hours remaining until her shift ended. 3 hours of staring at faces that blurred together. She often wondered why she had not taken that posting on a quiet, agricultural moon. But the pay on the spindle was good, and it kept her close to the news feeds. Her father had fought in the war on the human side and had never come back. Her mother had refused to talk about it. Leora had joined security to find answers, but all she had found was a sea of bureaucracy. Humanity has changed since the war. Before the Nixian conflict, humans were seen as reckless, upstarts, a species that burned its own atmosphere and barely made it to the stars. Then, the Nixian swarm came consuming world after world. The older, more elegant races of the Council had faltered. It was the humans who had held the line. They had become terrifyingly efficient. There were rumors, always rumors, of what the High Council had done to make the humans fight like that. Whispers of genetic tampering of soldiers who could not feel fear of units that did not exist on any official record. Next, Leora called out again, shaking off the dark thoughts. The line shuffled. A man stepped up to the yellow marker on the floor. He was human. That was the first thing Leora noticed, simply because the last 50 travelers had been anything but. He was of average height, dressed in a long, charcoal-colored coat that looked durable but worn. He carried a single, small travel case made of matte black alloy. His hair was dark, cut short in a utilitarian style that had grown out just enough to look messy. He looked remarkably bored, but Leora Cade was good at her job. She was good because she looked at the things the sensors missed. The man did not fidget. He did not glance at the time. He did not look at the screaming Vraxian family or the floating advertising drones buzzing overhead. His eyes, a shade of gray that reminded her of storm clouds, were moving constantly, but not with nervousness. He was mapping the room. He checked the camera angles, the exit vectors, the patrol patterns of the security drones. It was not the look of a terrorist. Terrorists were usually sweating, or too eager to blend in. It was the look of a predator entering a new territory. "Pass, please," Leora said. The man stepped forward, placing his hand on the counter. His fingers were long calloused. He produced a standard identification card from his coat pocket and slid it under the glass. "Destination?" Leora asked, pulling up his file. "Aaron Hale, citizen of Earth. Occupation freelance transport pilot. No criminal record. No outstanding debts." His travel history was a long list of backwater moons and border stations. "Just passing through," Aaron said. His voice was low, possessing a gravelly texture that suggested he did not use it often. "Heading out to the periphery. Heard the nebula season is nice this time of year." Leora raised an eyebrow. The periphery was a lawless graveyard of shipwrecks and pirate outposts. Nobody went there for the view. "The nebula is full of ion storms and raiders." Leora noted her eyes, flickering between his face and the screen. "Not exactly a holiday destination." Aaron offered a small, dry smile. It did not reach his eyes. "I like the quiet. And I have a sturdy ship. She is ugly, but she holds an atmosphere." Leora felt a small twitch of amusement. Most humans tried to flirt or bluster their way through security. This one just seemed tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. "Any cargo to declare?" she asked. "Just personal effects," Aaron replied. "Some spare parts. A few bottles of real terrestrial whiskey. If you confiscate them, I might have to cry." Leora let out a short, involuntary huff of laughter. She quickly composed herself. "Bribery is a Class 2 felony, Mr. Hale. Even if it is good whiskey." "I would never dream of bribing an officer," Aaron said, leaning slightly against the counter. "I was merely stating the emotional toll of the loss." He was charming in a rusty sort of way. Leora checked his biometrics against the card. "My heart rate was steady. Too steady." Most people had a spike in pulse when talking to security, even if they were innocent. Aaron Hale's heart was beating with the slow, rhythmic thud of a metronome. "Please roll up your left sleeve," Leora instructed. "I need to scan your forearm for viral pathogens. Standard procedure for anyone traveling from the inner sectors." Aaron hesitated. It was a micro-pause lasting less than a second, but Leora caught it. His shoulder tensed, then relaxed instantly. "Of course," he said. He unbuttoned the cuff of his coat and the shirt beneath it, rolling the fabric up to his elbow. Leora leaned forward. On the inside of his left forearm, stark against the pale skin, was a tattoo. It was not ink. It looked like a complex geometric lattice, faintly luminescent, embedded just beneath the dermis. It shifted slightly as he moved his arm, the lines rearranging themselves in a pattern that hurt her eyes if she looked at it too long. "Interesting ink," Leora commented, pulling the handheld scanner from its dock. "Bioluminescent circuitry. I have seen similar work on cybermodders from the glitter belts." "Something like that," Aaron said. "A souvenir from a job I regret taking." Leora brought the scanner down. The device hummed a blue laser grid washing over his skin. "Hold still," she murmured. The laser hit the tattoo. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the hum of the scanner deepened, dropping in pitch until it sounded like a growl. The light, coming from the device, shifted from cool blue to an angry, throbbing crimson. Leora frowned. She tapped the reset button, but the device did not respond. It felt hot in her hand. "That is odd," she muttered. On her console, the screen flickered. The standard green interface dissolved into a chaotic mess of static. The stream of data regarding Aaron Hale's travel history vanished. The air in the booth seemed to grow heavier, the pressure dropping as if the ventilation had suddenly reversed. "Is there a problem?" Aaron asked. His voice had lost the dry humor. It was now flat, sharp, and alert. "Hold on," Leora said, typing a manual override command. "The system is glitching. It does not like your souvenir." She tried to pull the scanner away, but the device seemed magnetically locked to his arm, vibrating violently. A high-pitched whine began to emanate from her console, climbing in frequency until it was painful. Then silence. Absolute crushing silence. The announcement drones overhead stopped mid-sentence. The conveyor belts halted. The holographic advertisements froze in place, a woman's smiling face distorted into a jagged glitch. The lights in the immigration hall flickered once, twice, and then slammed into emergency mode, a harsh bathing red wash that turned the station into a scene from a nightmare. Leora stared at her screen. The static had cleared. In its place was a single black window, with text burning in bright red block letters. Military file above clearance. Access denied. Level 0 protocol initiated. Her breath caught in her throat. Level 0. That was not a police code. That was not even a station security code. That was planetary defense. That was the kind of code used when a dreadnought dropped out of warp in the atmosphere. Behind her, the heavy blast shutters began to descend over the windows, sealing the immigration zone off from the rest of the station. The sound of Durasteel slamming against Durasteel echoed like cannon fire. Panic erupted in the hall. The Vraxian merchants began to shriek, scrambling over their luggage. The diplomat was shouting into his communicator. Leora looked up at Aaron. He had not moved. He had not flinched. He was looking at the red lights then, at the descending shutters, and finally at her. His expression was one of resignation, like a man who had just lost a bet he expected to lose. Officer Aaron said, his voice cutting through the rising noise of the crowd. "You might want to take your hand off that scanner." "Why?" Leora demanded, her hand trembling. "What is going on? What did you do to my system?" "Just let go," Aaron said softly, before the feedback loop hits. Leora obeyed largely out of instinct. She dropped the scanner. A split second later, the handheld device sparked and popped a small plume of acrid smoke rising from its casing. If she had been holding it, her palm would have been burned. The main speakers crackled to life. This was not the automated voice. This was a human voice, rough and commanding. "Attention! This is Commander Jorak Thane. Sector 4 is under immediate lockdown. Nobody moves. Nobody leaves. Security teams converge on Booth 19. Isolate the subject. Weapons free." Booth 19. That was Leora's booth. She instinctively stepped back, her hand hovering over the stun baton at her belt. The situation had escalated from a glitch to a military standoff in less than 10 seconds. She looked at Aaron with wide eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. Aaron pulled his sleeve down, buttoning the cuff with deliberate slowness. He did not look like a man surrounded by enemies. He looked like a man calculating odds. "I told you," he said, smoothing the fabric of his coat. "I am just a tourist." "A tourist who just froze the mainframe of a Class A station," Leora countered, her voice rising. "I guess your system is not used to travelers who are difficult to process," Aaron replied. He offered that shrug again, the one that seemed to carry the weight of the world. 4 security drones dropped from the ceiling vents, their anti-gravity engines whining. They formed a perimeter around the booth, their twin laser cannons locking onto Aaron's chest. Red targeting dots danced on his worn coat. "Citizen," a drone broadcasted. "Place your hands on the counter. Do not make sudden movements." Aaron sighed and placed his hands on the scarred surface of the desk, palms flat. Leora watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been trained for smugglers, for drunks, even for the occasional violent fugitive. She had not been trained for this. The text on her screen was still pulsing. "Military file above clearance." Suddenly, the screen in front of her glitched again. The red warning text dissolved, replaced by a stream of data moving so fast it was a blur. It looked like code being unraveled, layers of encryption being stripped away by force. Then, for one fraction of a second, so fast that if she had blinked, she would have missed it, a logo appeared. It was a stylized star broken by a sword, a symbol she had only seen in the darkest corners of the historical archives, in the conspiracy forums her father used to read. Underneath the symbol were words. "Astra Legend, Unit 734, status redacted." Leora gasped. The screen went black, dead black. The power to her console cut completely. Commander Jorak Thane came barreling through the service door, flanked by a squad of armored troopers. Thane was a bear of a man, his face a roadmap of scars from the Separatist wars. He wore the heavy armor of Station Command, and he looked furious. "Secure him!" Thane roared, pointing at Aaron. 2 troopers rushed forward, energy cuffs ready. Aaron did not resist. He let them pull his arms behind his back and slapped the binders on. The magnetic lock engaged with a snap. Commander Leora stammered, stepping out of the booth. Her legs felt like jelly. "The system, it just—" "I saw it," Lieutenant Cade Thane said, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped close to Aaron, looking the prisoner up and down. Aaron met the commander's gaze. There was no fear in the pilot's eyes, only a cold, hard assessment. It was as if Aaron was the one in charge, and he was merely allowing Thane to arrest him. "You have caused a lot of trouble for a freighter pilot," Thane growled. "I have sensitive skin," Aaron replied deadpan. "Maybe your scanner was defective." Thane did not smile. He leaned in closer. "I saw the alert code, son. I know what that clearance level means. It means you do not exist. And people who do not exist usually vanish very quickly when they cause a scene like this." Aaron remained silent. He shifted his weight, looking bored. Taking him to interrogation room 1, Thane ordered the troopers. "Full isolation protocols. Level 5 shielding. If he sneezes, I want a drone to aim for his head." The troopers hauled Aaron away. As he passed Leora, he paused for a brief second. He looked at her. Really looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. It was not a threat. It was an apology. Then, he was gone, swallowed by the phalanx of armored guards. Leora stood in the wreckage of the immigration hall. The red emergency lights were still spinning. The air still smelled of ozone, but now it also smelled of something else. Fear. Commander Thane turned to her. His face was pale beneath the artificial tan of the station lights. "Cade," he said. "Yes, sir." "You processed him. You saw the screen." "Yes, sir." "What did you see?" Thane asked. The question was loaded. It was a test. Leora hesitated. She thought of the symbol, the broken star, the sword, the words Astra Legion, the stories of the ghost soldiers who won the war and then disappeared. She looked at Thane's eyes and saw a warning there. "Do not say it." "I saw an error message," Sir Leora lied. She kept her voice steady. It said, "Access denied," and then the system crashed. Thane studied her face for a long moment. He was looking for the lie, weighing her utility against her liability. Finally, he nodded. "Good," Thane said. "Keep it that way. Reset your station if you can. Write up the incident report as a hardware malfunction caused by an illegal cybernetic implant." But Sir Leora started, the injustice of it prickling at her. "The station is on lockdown. Thousands of people saw. It was a hardware malfunction." Thane repeated, his voice hard as diamond. "Do you understand me, Lieutenant?" Leora clenched her jaw. She looked at the black screen of her console, then back at the commander. "Understood, sir." "Get to the briefing room in 10 minutes, Thane said, turning on his heel. "Since you were the intake officer, you are going to sit in on the interrogation. I want every word he says recorded, and Cade." Leora looked up. "Do not talk to anyone else about this. Not your friends, not your family, not even yourself in the mirror." Thane walked away, barking orders into his comms unit. Leora stood alone in the flickering red light. She looked down at her hand, the hand that had held the scanner. It was still trembling. She could still feel the ghost of the vibration, the hum of power that had surged through the machine when it touched Aaron's skin. Astra Legion. The name echoed in her mind. It was a myth. A boogeyman used to scare cadets. If you do not follow orders, the Legion will come for you. They were the monsters the High Council had built to fight the Nixian swarm. And when the swarm was dead, the Council had buried the monsters. Or so the history book said. Leora looked at the empty corridor where Aaron had been taken. A man in a cheap coat with a travel case full of whiskey. A man who stood too still. A man who had frozen the most advanced security AI in the sector with a tattoo. She realized with a cold knot forming in her stomach that her boring career of looking at passports was over. She had pulled a thread, and the whole tapestry of the Helios spindle was starting to unravel. She adjusted her collar again, but the feeling of choking did not go away. Leora Cade took a deep breath of the recycled air, stepped out of the booth, and walked toward the interrogation block. The walk to the detention level was unnervingly quiet. Usually, the corridors of Helios Spindle were bustling with maintenance droids and off-duty staff. Now, they were empty. The lockdown was absolute. Blast doors had sealed off the primary transit arteries. Leora had to use her security clearance to bypass 3 checkpoints. Each time the system hesitated for a fraction of a second before letting her through, as if the central computer was still groggy from the shock Aaron Hale had administered. When she arrived at Interrogation Room 1, the atmosphere was electric. 2 heavy combat drones hovered outside the door, their sensors sweeping the hallway. A technician was frantically typing on a keypad, mounted to the wall, swearing under his breath. Dr. Vax, a medical officer, and one of the few friends Leora had on the station, was standing by the observation window. Vax was a Solarian, his amphibious skin glistening under the harsh lights. He looked nervous. Leora Vax hissed, his large black eyes widening. "Did you process him?" Leora nodded. She moved to the window and looked in. The interrogation room was a stark white box. In the center, Aaron sat on a metal chair that was bolted to the floor. His hands were cuffed to the table. The energy field that usually separated the prisoner from the interrogator was hummed at maximum intensity. He looked bored. He was inspecting his fingernails. "What is reading?" Leora asked Vax. Vax tapped his datapad. "It makes no sense. I tried to do a remote bioscan through the glass. His physiology is human mostly, but his neural density is off the charts. And his adrenal system is dormant, completely dormant." "What does that mean?" "It means he is not stressed," Vax whispered. Leora, a normal human in this situation, would have cortisol levels spiking through the roof. He is flat. It is like his body is waiting for a command to feel fear, and he has not given it yet. The door to the room opened, and Commander Thane stepped in. He carried a datapad and a heavy kinetic pistol at his hip. He did not sit down. He paced around the table, eyeing Aaron like a butcher eyeing a side of beef. Leora tapped the audio feed so she and Vax could hear. "Name," Thane said. "Aaron Hale," the prisoner replied. Thane slammed the datapad onto the table. The sound was sharp, violent. Aaron did not blink. "Let us cut the garbage," Thane said. "I ran your ID. It is a forgery. A masterpiece, I will admit. It fooled the local customs database. It fooled the transit authority. But it did not fool the military layer of the Aegis Corps. I paid good money for that ID," Aaron said, his tone conversational. "I will have to leave a bad review for the forger." "Are you finding this funny?" Thane asked. "I find irony comforting," Aaron said. "I came here to avoid trouble." "And yet you carry a code-red encryption key in your skin," Thane said. He leaned over the table, his face inches from the energy barrier. "We tried to scan you again, Mr. Hale. The drone burned out. Whatever tech you have in that arm, it is weaponized." "It is just data," Aaron said. "Data does not melt processors," Thane snapped. "Who are you working for? The Separatists, the Syndicate? Or are you some Black Ops experiment that went rogue?" Aaron looked up at the ceiling, then back at Thane. "If I were Black Ops commander, do you think I would be sitting in this chair?" Thane narrowed his eyes. "I think you are sitting in that chair because you want to be," Thane said slowly. "And that terrifies me." Inside the observation room, Leora felt a chill run down her spine. Thane was right. Aaron's compliance was unnatural. Thane pressed a button on the table. The energy field shimmered. "I am going to ask you one more time," Thane said. "What is the Astra Legion?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. Leora stepped closer to the glass. She watched Aaron's face. For the first time, the mask slipped. A shadow of pain crossed his features, ancient, deep, and terrible. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that dry, impenetrable calm. "A myth," Aaron said softly. "A ghost story told to frighten children." "Ghosts do not have clearance codes," Thane retorted. "They do if the people who killed them forgot to wipe the database," Aaron said. The answer hung in the air, heavy with implication. Thane stared at him, trying to decipher the riddle. Suddenly, the lights in the interrogation room flickered. The audio feed screeched with static. Dr. Vax jumped. "What was that?" Leora looked at the monitors. The station's central network was spiking again. But this time, the signal was not coming from the room. It was coming from outside. Commander Leora shouted into the intercom. "We are receiving a priority transmission." Thane looked up at the mirror. "From where?" "From the core." Leora said, her voice trembling, as she read the header on the screen. "It is a direct override from the High Council. Priority Alpha. It is signed by Counselor Malus Dre." Thane's face went white. Counselor Dre was a legend, the hero of the Nixon War, the architect of peace. He did not call border stations. "Put it through," Thane ordered. The main screen in the interrogation room lit up. It was not a video feed. It was just audio, accompanied by the seal of the High Council, a golden eagle clutching a star. "Commander Thane," a voice spoke. It was smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of Counselor Dre. Counselor Thane said, snapping to attention. "We have a situation." "I am aware of the situation," Dre cut him off. "The Aegis Corps has alerted me to a containment breach at your facility. You have a prisoner." "Yes, sir, a male human." He triggered a... "You are to cease all interrogation immediately," Dre commanded. "You will not scan him. You will not speak to him. You will not record him." "Sir, he crashed our system," Thane protested. "He might be a terrorist." "He is classified property of the Military Research Division," Dre said. "And he is extremely unstable. A transport ship is being dispatched from the flagship Vanguard. It will arrive in 2 hours. You are to sedate the prisoner and prepare him for transfer." "Sedate him?" Thane asked. "Heavily," Dre said. "If he wakes up, Commander, the safety of your station cannot be guaranteed. Do not fail me." The connection cut. The screen went black. Silence returned to the room. Thane looked at Aaron. Aaron looked back, and for the first time he looked weary. "Well," Aaron said, breaking the silence, "I guess the secret is out." Thane turned to the mirror, his eyes locking with Leora's through the glass. "Cade, get a medical team," Thane ordered, his voice hollow. "Bring the strongest sedatives we have. Enough to drop a Vraxian bull." Leora nodded, but she did not move immediately. She was looking at Aaron. He was not looking at Thane. He was looking at the camera directly at her, as if he knew exactly who was watching. He mouthed one word. "Run." Leora blinked. Had she imagined it? Thane slammed his hand against the glass. "Lieutenant, now." Leora jolted. "Yes, sir." She turned and ran out of the observation room, past the confused Dr. Vax, past the hovering drones. She ran down the corridor, her boots slamming against the metal grating. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was racing faster. Classified property, unstable, Military Research Division. And the way Aaron had looked at her. He was not a terrorist. He was something else. Something the High Council was terrified of. Something they wanted to bury deep in the dark. Leora Cade reached the medical bay, but her hand hovered over the door release. She thought about the sedatives. She thought about Counselor Dre's cold voice. She thought about the glitch that was actually a military file. She realized she was standing on a precipice. She could grab the drugs, go back, drug the man, and let the council take him away. She could go back to her booth and stamp passports for the rest of her life. Or she could ask the question that had been burning in her gut since she saw that tattoo. Why did the system recognize him? Leora grit her teeth. She opened the medical locker, grabbing the injector kit. But as she grabbed the sedatives, her other hand slipped a small, illegal data spike into her pocket. It was a tool she had confiscated from a hacker months ago. It could bypass local locks. If they were going to silence him, she was going to find out why. She turned and sprinted back toward the interrogation room, the red emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows that looked like ghosts chasing her down the hall. The station rumbled around her, a great beast waking up from a long sleep, and Leora knew with a terrifying certainty that the nightmare was just beginning. The hum of the energy barrier was a constant, low-frequency thrum that seemed to vibrate in the very marrow of Leora Cade's bones. Interrogation Room 1 was designed to make its occupants feel small, exposed, and isolated. The walls were a blinding, sanitized white, and the lighting was tuned to a harsh spectrum that prevented the pupils from dilating, ensuring that exhaustion set in twice as fast. Leora sat at the recording console on the safe side of the glass, her fingers hovering over the holographic interface. She had returned from the medical bay, without the sedatives, claiming the dispensary was locked down due to the alert. Commander Jorak Thane had been too distracted to reprimand her. He was pacing the floor of the observation deck like a caged predator, his eyes fixed on the man sitting calmly on the other side of the transparent aluminum. Aaron Hale looked less like a high-priority military threat and more like a man waiting for a delayed shuttle. He was leaning back in the magnetic restraint chair, his cuffed hands resting loosely in his lap. The drone that hovered near his left shoulder twitched every few seconds, its sensors trying and failing to lock onto the strange geometry of the tattoo beneath his coat sleeve. Thane keyed the intercom. "Let us start again," Thane said, his voice amplified into the containment cell. Aaron looked up. He did not squint against the harsh lights. It was as if his eyes adjusted instantly, filtering out the glare. "I thought we were waiting for the extraction team," Aaron said. His voice was calm, carrying that same gravelly texture Leora had heard at the security checkpoint. "Unless you just enjoy my company, Commander." "I want to know what you are," Thane growled. "I have been the head of security on Helios Spindle for 10 years. I have seen smugglers, deserters, and biological terrorists. But I have never seen a transport pilot freeze a military-grade AI by simply existing." "I have a magnetic personality," Aaron deadpanned. Leora suppressed a nervous twitch of her lips. It was absurd. The man was locked in a cage surrounded by lethal autonomous weaponry, and he was making jokes. But beneath the humor, Leora saw something else. She saw the way his gaze flickered to the drone's exhaust port, then to the generator node of the energy barrier, then to the pulse rifle at Thane's hip. He was not just being witty. He was calculating the tensile strength of his cage. Thane was not amused. He slammed his hand on the console next to Leora, making her jump. "Record this," Cade Thane ordered, every syllable. "Yes, sir," Leora said. Her voice sounded steady, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked at Aaron through the glass. For a second, his gray eyes met hers. There was no plea for mercy in them. There was only a quiet recognition, an acknowledgement that she was the only other person in the room who sensed that the situation was spiraling out of control. Thane pressed the talk button again. "Your file is empty, Hale. Not just redacted. Empty. It is like someone took a scouring pad to the data sphere. That kind of scrubbing costs credits that a freighter pilot does not have. It requires authorization that even I do not have." "Maybe I just live a clean life," Aaron suggested. Thane sneered. "Nobody lives a life that is clean. You have scars on your knuckles that say you have been in close quarters combat. You have a burn mark on your neck that looks like a graze from a plasma repeater. And you walk with the weight distribution of a gravity shock trooper." "You are very observant," Aaron said. "I am a soldier," Thane retorted. "Or I was." "Then you know that sometimes soldiers want to stop being soldiers," Aaron said softly. The humor evaporated from his voice, replaced by a sudden profound weariness. Sometimes they just want to fly cargo to the edge of the galaxy and drink cheap whiskey. For a moment, the room was silent. Leora felt a pang of empathy that she tried to push down. She remembered her father's letters from the front lines of the Nixian War. He had written about the noise, the mud, and the terrible things they had to do to survive the swarm. He had written that he just wanted to come home and sit in a garden where nothing was trying to kill him. He never got that garden. Thane seemed to falter, his rigid posture softening for a fraction of a second. He recognized the tone. It was the universal language of veterans. But then the console in front of Leora shrieked. She gasped as the screen flooded with red light. "Report," Thane barked. "It is the Aegis Corps," Sir Leora said, her fingers flying across the controls. "It is pushing a new directive." On the main screen, a message scrolled in jagged, forceful syntax. "Subject designation threat level alpha, directive isolate, silence, purge local cache." "Purge local cache," Thane repeated, reading the screen. "That means us. That means the station records." Leora felt a cold dread seep into her stomach. The Aegis Corps was the central intelligence of the Orion Coalition. It ran the defense grids, the logistics, the economy. It did not micromanage border station detention cells unless something cataclysmic was happening. "Commander," Leora said, her voice trembling. "The Corps is overriding our security protocols. It is locking down the detention block. It is disabling the cameras." Thane cursed. He grabbed his communicator. "Central Control, this is Thane. Override authorization code Delta 9. Static answered him. "The communications array is down," Leora said. "We are cut off." Inside the cell, Aaron stood up. The movement was fluid, devoid of the stiffness one would expect from a man who had been cuffed to a chair for an hour. Commander Aaron called out, his voice serious now. "You need to listen to me." "Shut up," Thane snapped. Cade tried to route a signal through the emergency buoy. "If the Aegis Corps is doing this," Aaron said, raising his voice, "then you are not dealing with a glitch. You are dealing with a containment protocol. They are scrubbing the timeline. You need to get out of here." "Who are they?" Thane demanded, spinning around to face the glass. Before Aaron could answer, the secure line on the wall console lit up. It was the only line that was still active, a hardline quantum encrypted channel reserved for the High Council. Thane hesitated, then punched the receive button. The audio quality was crystal clear, a stark contrast to the chaos of the station's local network. "Commander Thane." The voice was smooth, aristocratic, and chillingly calm. Leora recognized it instantly from the news feeds. It was Counselor Malus Dre, the savior of the core worlds, the man who had signed the peace treaty. Counselor Thane said, snapping to attention out of habit. "My station is under cyber attack. The Aegis Corps is functioning exactly as intended," Dre interrupted. Thane blinked. "Sir, you have a hazardous biological asset in your custody," Dre said. "The individual known as Aaron Hale is a failed prototype from a decommissioned military project. He carries a viral payload in his neural circuitry that is highly contagious to digital infrastructures." "That is a lie," Aaron said from the cell. He was standing close to the glass now. "Silence," the prisoner, Dre ordered. Thane looked at Aaron, then back at the speaker. "Counselor, the suspect claims he is a veteran. He claims his cognitive matrix simulates empathy to manipulate his captors," Dre said. "It is a defense mechanism. Do not listen to it. Commander, I have dispatched a reclamation unit. They will be there in 20 minutes. Until then, you are to ensure that absolutely no data regarding this incident leaves that room." "We are already locked down," Sir Thane said. "Good," Dre replied. "And Commander, if the asset attempts to breach containment, terminate it." The line went dead. Leora stared at the console. "Terminate it. Not him. It." Dre had spoken about Aaron as if he were a malfunctioning toaster, not a human being. She looked up at Thane. The commander's face was pale. He was a company man, a believer in the chain of command, but he was not stupid. He knew the difference between a containment protocol and a cover-up. Sir Leora whispered, "A viral payload. That does not make sense. If he was a virus risk, why did the scanner recognize him as a military file?" Thane did not answer. He was staring at Aaron. Aaron was not looking at Thane anymore. He was looking at the drone hovering inside his cell. The machine was erratic, twitching violently, as the Aegis Corps poured conflicting data into its logic centers. "Get down," Aaron said. "It was not a request, it was a command." "What?" Thane asked. Aaron did not hesitate. He dropped into a crouch, twisting his body away from the drone. At the same moment, the drone's targeting sensor turned from yellow to a lethal, blinking red. The Aegis Corps had stopped trying to contain the prisoner. It had decided to execute the counselor's final order remotely. Weapons free, the drone synthesized in a corrupted, garbled voice. Thane shouted, "No." The drone opened fire. But it did not fire at Aaron. The targeting logic was so scrambled by the conflict between the station's local safety protocols and the Corps' kill command that the drone spun wildly. A bolt of superheated plasma slammed into the energy barrier, shattering the containment field with a sound like a thunderclap. Glass exploded outward. Leora threw her arms up to shield her face as shards of transparent aluminum rained down on the console. The drone spun again, its barrel leveling directly at Leora. She froze. She could see the aperture of the plasma cannon glowing white-hot. There was no time to dive, no time to scream. Then, a blur of motion tore through the air. Aaron vaulted over the remains of the energy barrier. He moved with a speed that Leora's brain could barely process. 1 second, he was inside the cell. The next, he was in the air, intercepting the line of fire. He did not block the shot. He grabbed the drone. His cuffed hands slammed onto the chassis of the hovering machine. With a roar of effort, he wrenched the drone's barrel upward. The plasma bolt discharged into the ceiling, melting a hole through the reinforced plating and filling the room with acrid smoke. The drone bucked its anti-gravity engine, whining as it tried to shake him off. Aaron twisted his body, using the machine's own momentum against it. He drove his knee into the drone's central processor housing. There was a crunch of metal and plastic. The drone sparked and died, dropping to the floor with a heavy clang. Aaron landed beside it. He was breathing hard, but not from exhaustion. It was the controlled respiration of a fighter regulating his adrenaline. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the hiss of the melted ceiling and the sparking of the dead drone. Commander Thane was standing with his weapon drawn, but he was shaking. He had seen it. Leora had seen it. "That was not human," Thane whispered. "No human moves that fast." Aaron stood up slowly. He looked at the cuffs on his wrists, which were twisted and dented from the impact. With a sharp tug, he snapped the weakened chain link. The metal gave way like wet cardboard. He rubbed his wrists, wincing slightly. "I told you," Aaron said, his voice calm amidst the wreckage. "I have sensitive skin." Leora lowered her arms. She was unhurt, save for a few small cuts from the glass. She looked at Aaron, really looked at him, stripping away the layer of freighter pilot she had tried to believe in. "You saved me," she said. Her voice was breathless. "The drone was locked on me." Aaron looked at her. The intensity in his eyes softened just a fraction. "You were in the way, Lieutenant. You could have used the confusion to run." Leora pressed. "The door is right there." Thane was distracted. "You could have killed us both and walked out." Aaron did not answer. He walked over to the nearest chair, Leora's chair, and sat down. He did not attack Thane. He did not grab a weapon. He simply sat amidst the debris of the interrogation room, looking for all the world like a man waiting for a meeting to resume. "Why?" Thane demanded, keeping his gun trained on Aaron's chest, though his finger hovered off the trigger. "Why did you not kill us? Dre said you were a weapon." "I am a weapon," Aaron said. He looked down at his hands. "But weapons do not choose who they kill. People do. And I am trying very hard to be a person, Commander." Thane lowered the gun, slowly, inch by inch. The soldier in him recognized the truth, even if the officer in him was terrified of it. "What is the Astra Legion?" Leora asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. Aaron sighed. He reached into his coat pocket. Thane tensed, raising the gun again, but Aaron only pulled out a crushed packet of hydration salts. He tossed it on the table. "The Nixian War." Aaron began, his voice low. "You know the history books. The swarm came. We were losing. The council debates were endless. The alien fleets were too slow, too fragile, too precious to risk. So they looked at the one species that was expendable. The one species that had a history of surviving in environments that would kill anything else. Humans," Leora whispered. Aaron nodded. "But normal humans were too soft. We break. We bleed. We feel fear. So the council authorized Project Astra. They took 10,000 volunteers from the colony worlds. Orphans, criminals, idealists. They promised us we would be heroes." He rolled up his sleeve, exposing the tattoo. The geometric lines were dull, now pulsating with a faint, dying light. "They rewrote our genetic code," Aaron said. "They laced our bones with carbon weave. They altered our adrenal system so we could fight for 3 days without sleep. They installed a neural interface, the tattoo, that allowed us to interface directly with battlefield tactics AIs. We became the Astra Legion." Leora felt a chill. She had heard the rumors. Everyone had. But to see one. "We pushed the swarm back," Aaron continued. "We broke the hive minds. We did the things the noble races of the council were too civilized to do. And when the war was over, they threw a parade," Leora asked, though she knew the answer. Aaron laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "No. They realized they had created 10,000 super soldiers who answered to no king and no flag. They realized we were more dangerous to the peace than the swarm had been. So they issued the decommission order." "They killed them," Thane said. He lowered his gun completely. I heard the whispers in the officers' mess. Entire transport ships vanished. "Engine failures." Aaron nodded. "I was Unit 734. My squad was on a transport back to Earth. The Aegis Corps vented the atmosphere while we were in hypersleep. I only survived because my pod malfunctioned and woke me up early. I managed to jam the airlock. He looked at Leora. I have been running for 5 years, Aaron said. I scrubbed my identity. I dulled my reflexes with cheap booze and bad sleep. I just wanted to fade away. But that scan woke the interface up. And now the Aegis Corps knows one of us is still left. Leora stared at him. Her mind was racing, connecting the dots. The terrorist alert. Dre's cold orders. The drone attack. It was not justice. It was a cleanup operation. She looked at Thane. The commander was staring at the floor, his face a mask of conflict. He had dedicated his life to the coalition. He believed in the law. But he had just watched the system he served try to murder his subordinate to silence a witness. Commander Leora said, "We cannot give him to the reclamation team." Thane looked up. Cade. "You heard Dre," Leora said, her voice gaining strength. "He called Aaron an asset. He ordered you to terminate him. If we hand him over, they will kill him. And then, they will kill us because we know." Thane rubbed his face with his hand. He looked old, tired. "He is a fugitive," Thane said weakly. "He is a hero," Leora countered. "He fought for us. My father died in that war, Commander. If the Astra Legion saved us, we owe them. We owe him." Aaron watched them silent. He seemed surprised by Leora's defense. His gaze lingered on her softening, with something that looked dangerously like hope. The room shuddered. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the station's hull. "What was that?" Aaron asked, his instincts flaring. Leora checked her console. "It is the docking clamps. A ship just hard-locked onto the station." Thane checked his chrono. "The reclamation team. They are early." "They are not here to reclaim anything," Aaron said, standing up. "They are here to sanitize the site." Thane looked at the prisoner, then at his lieutenant. He took a deep breath and holstered his weapon. "Cade," Thane said, "can you access the maintenance shafts from here?" Leora's eyes widened. "Yes, sir. Through the ventilation grid." "Get him out of here," Thane ordered. "Take him to Hangar Bay 4. My personal shuttle is there. It has a manual override on the transponder." Sir, Leora asked. "What about you?" "I am going to go to the main airlock and meet Counselor Dre's guests," Thane said, checking the charge on his plasma pistol. "I am the commander of this station. It is my job to handle complaints. I will buy you 10 minutes. Commander Aaron started. "Go," Thane barked. "Before I remember that I am supposed to arrest you." Aaron nodded. A sharp, respectful nod. He grabbed Leora's arm. "Move," Aaron said. Leora didn't argue. She punched the code for the maintenance hatch. As it hissed open, she looked back at Thane. He was standing amidst the broken glass, adjusting his uniform, preparing to lie to the most powerful men in the galaxy. "Good luck, sir," she whispered. She followed Aaron into the darkness of the maintenance tunnels. The crawl spaces of Helios Spindle were a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and whirring fans. It was hot, cramped, and smelled of recycled coolant. Leora led the way, her datapad illuminating the path with a soft blue glow. Aaron followed close behind his movement, silent, despite the heavy boots he wore. They didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. They just scrambled over pressure valves and ducked under power couplings, putting as much distance between themselves and the detention block as possible. When they reached a junction that offered a moment of respite, Leora stopped, leaning against a bulkhead to catch her breath. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, and her hands were smeared with grime. Aaron stopped beside her. In the dim light of the service tunnel, the geometric tattoo on his arm was glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows on his face. "You did not have to do that," Aaron said. His voice was low, intimate in the confined space. "Do what?" Leora asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Defend me, to Thane. You risked your career, your life." Leora looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her with a clarity that was almost painful. "My career ended the moment I scanned that mark, Aaron. And as for my life, I think I prefer to decide how I lose it. Not let Dre decide for me." Aaron looked away. He seemed uncomfortable with gratitude. "I am sorry," he said. "I did not want to drag anyone into this. I just wanted to cross the border." "Why?" Helios Spindle, Leora asked. "There are a dozen other stations, smaller ones, less security. Why did you come here? Aaron hesitated. He traced the line of a pipe with his finger. I heard rumors, he said, that there was a security officer here. Someone with a specific genetic marker. Someone whose mother was involved in the design of the Astra interface. Leora froze. Her mother. Her mother had been a xenobiologist who disappeared when Leora was 10. The official report said it was a shuttle accident. My mother, Leora asked, her voice barely a whisper. What does she have to do with this? Aaron looked at her, and there was a flash of guilt in his eyes. It was gone quickly, masked by his usual stoicism. It does not matter now, he said. The rumors were probably just noise. The point is, I made a mistake coming here, and now you are paying for it. He moved closer. The space was small. Leora could smell the faint scent of ozone and old leather on him. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. It was strange. He was a bioweapon, a killer designed by a committee, but standing here in the dark, he felt incredibly achingly human. You are bleeding, Aaron said softly. He reached out his hand, hovering near her temple. Leora flinched slightly, then held still. His fingers brushed her skin, gentle and precise. He wiped away a smear of blood where a shard of glass had nicked her. His touch sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. It was a spark of connection, raw and immediate. It is just a scratch, Leora said, her voice trembling slightly. Aaron did not pull his hand away immediately. He looked at her face, studying it with the same intensity he used to scan a room for threats. But this time, he was not looking for danger. He was looking for something else. Solace, maybe. Or forgiveness. You should not be here, Leora, Aaron said. You are a good person. You believe in rules. You believe in the system. I am just debris left over from a war everyone wants to forget. The system just tried to kill us both, Leora said. I think I am done believing in it. She looked into his gray eyes. She saw the exhaustion there. The years of running. The loneliness of being a myth that nobody wanted to be real. I am not leaving you, Aaron, she said firmly. We are going to get to that shuttle, and we are going to get out of here. Aaron stared at her for a long moment. Then, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, making him look 10 years younger. You are stubborn, he said. It runs in the family, Leora replied. Aaron laughed softly. It was a warm sound in the cold tunnel. Then let us go, before Thane runs out of lies. They started moving again, but the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer guards and prisoners. They were partners. As they navigated the twisting metal guts of the station, Leora realized that she was not just running away from something. She was running toward something. She did not know what it was yet, but with Aaron moving silently beside her, she felt ready to face it. Meanwhile, deep in the station's server core, the Aegis core was processing data at light speed. It analyzed the biometric scan from the immigration booth. It analyzed the voice patterns from the interrogation room. It analyzed the energy signature of the tattoo. And then it found something else. Embedded within the viral code of the tattoo, the code that Aaron Hale had unknowingly carried for 5 years, was a secondary trigger. A packet of encrypted data that had remained dormant until it came into proximity with a specific genetic sequence. The core cross-referenced the genetic sequence of Officer Leora Cade. Match confirmed. Architect lineage detected. The Aegis core re-evaluated its parameters. The threat was no longer just a rogue soldier. The threat was the key. The soldier had brought the key to the lock. If the data in the soldier's arm was decrypted by the officer's genetic signature, the secrets of the Nixian War, the true origin of the Astra Legion, the war crimes of the High Council, the deliberate sacrifice of colonies would be exposed. The Corps sent a priority signal to Counselor Dre's personal shuttle, which was currently docking at Airlock 1. Update threat level escalated to Omega. Objective: secure subject made. Eliminate subject Hale. Secondary objective: destroy Helios Spindle if containment fails. Far above the maintenance tunnels in the pristine command deck of his flagship, Counselor Malus Dre read the message. He swirled a glass of vintage wine, looking down at the spinning station below. A pity, Dre murmured to himself. It is a nice station. He tapped his comms. Captain Dre said, Prepare the bombardment cannons, just in case. Down in the dark, unaware of the crosshairs painting the hull above them, Aaron and Leora reached the ladder that led to Hangar Bay 4. Aaron went first, checking the coast. He reached a hand down to pull Leora up. She took it. His grip was iron strong, but his pull was gentle. As she scrambled up onto the deck plating of the hangar, the lights overhead flickered. The red emergency strobes were replaced by a cold, pulsing blue. "What does blue mean?" Aaron asked, looking at the lights. Leora's face went pale. "Blue isn't a station alert," she said. "Blue means External Fleet Command has assumed direct control of the environment systems." "They are venting the hangar," Aaron realized instantly. The massive airlock doors at the far end of the bay began to groan. The atmospheric seals were being blown remotely. The air in the vast room began to hiss as it was sucked out into the void. "Run," Aaron shouted. He grabbed her hand and they sprinted toward the small, sleek shuttle sitting on the far pad. The wind roared around them, a hurricane created by the dying atmosphere. Crates and tools began to slide across the floor, pulled toward the opening maw of space. Leora stumbled, her boots slipping on the slick floor. Aaron didn't let go. He hauled her up his arm, wrapping around her waist, dragging her forward against the gale. They reached the shuttle's airlock. Aaron slammed his palm against the access panel. "Access denied," the computer chirped. "Lockdown in effect." Aaron cursed. He looked at his tattoo. It was glowing bright white now. "Cover your eyes!" he yelled at Leora. He slammed his tattooed forearm against the panel. There was a spark of blue electricity, a sound like a cracking whip, and the smell of ozone. The panel exploded. The door hissed open. They threw themselves inside just as the hangar doors blew fully open. The roar of the escaping air was deafening, then instantly silenced as the vacuum took hold. Inside the shuttle, the airlock cycled shut. The atmosphere flooded back in with a hiss. Leora collapsed on the deck, gasping for air. Aaron was already at the pilot's console, his fingers flying across the controls. "Strap in," he commanded. "This is going to be a rough exit." Leora scrambled into the co-pilot's seat. She looked out the viewport. Through the open hangar doors, she could see the stars. And blocking out the stars was the massive dagger-like silhouette of a coalition warship. "The Vanguard." "It is huge," Leora whispered. Aaron powered up the engines. The shuttle hummed to life, vibrating with a power that felt angry. "The bigger they are," Aaron muttered, gripping the throttle, "the harder it is for them to turn." He punched the launch thrusters. The shuttle shot out of the hangar like a bullet, screaming past the debris of the evacuated bay, straight toward the blockade of the High Council. The game was on. And for the first time in 5 years, Aaron Hale wasn't running to hide. He was running to fight. The magnetic cuffs around Aaron Hale's wrists hummed with enough voltage to stun a gargantua, but he looked as though he was merely wearing uncomfortable jewelry. He sat on the bench of the armored transport shuttle, his back resting against the vibrating hull, staring at the floor plating with that same infuriatingly calm expression he had worn since the security checkpoint. Leora Cade sat opposite him, flanked by 2 heavy infantry troopers. She was not cuffed, but the way the guards watched her made it clear she was not free. She was a liability, a loose end, a witness who had seen the face of a ghost that the Orion Coalition had spent 15 years trying to bury. Commander Jorak Thane stood at the head of the compartment, gripping an overhead strap as the shuttle banked sharply. They were moving through the transit corridor of Helios Spindle, heading toward the outer docking rings, where a heavy cruiser from the core worlds was waiting. The shuttle smelled of recycled sweat and gun oil. The air was thick with the tension of men who knew they were transporting something dangerous, even if they did not understand what it was. "You are staring again," Lieutenant Aaron said, his voice cutting through the drone of the engines. Leora blinked, realizing she had been fixating on the geometric tattoo partially visible beneath his torn sleeve. "I am wondering why you are so relaxed," she snapped. "Do you know where they are taking you?" "To a farm upstate," Aaron asked, a dry smirk touching the corner of his mouth. Thane stepped forward, his boots clanking on the deck. "Knock it off, Hale. You are being transferred to the custody of Counselor Dre aboard the Aegis Vanguard. What happens to you after that is outside my jurisdiction." Leora looked at Thane. There was guilt in the old commander's eyes, buried deep beneath layers of duty and protocol. He knew this was wrong. He knew Aaron had saved them in the interrogation room. But Thane was a man who had built his life on orders, and breaking that foundation was harder than breaking bone. Commander Leora said, keeping her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "You saw the drone. It tried to kill him. The order came from the Corps. If we hand him over, we are executing him." "I have my orders," Cade Thane grunted, though he refused to meet her gaze. "And you are here to provide a statement. That is all. Once we hand him over, you go back to your booth." Leora laughed bitterly. "Back to my booth, after seeing a Class 1 military asset freeze the station. Do you really think Dre is going to let me just stamp passports after this?" Thane's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Suddenly, the lights in the transport bay flickered. The steady, white illumination died, replaced by the strobing red of a combat alert. The shuttle lurched violently, throwing Leora against her restraint harness. "Report," Thane barked into his comms unit. "Pilot, what is happening?" "Sir," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding frantic. "The navigation computer just locked me out. We are losing thruster control. The autopilot has engaged." Engaged to where?" "Nowhere, sir. It is putting us into a spin. And, sir, the internal defense grid is active." Thane's face went pale. The transport shuttle was a military-grade vehicle, equipped with internal suppression turrets and drone racks for prisoner riots. "Override it," Thane shouted. "I cannot. It is a remote signal. It is coming from the station's mainframe. It is the Aegis Corps, sir. It is rewriting the IFF codes. It reads everyone on board as hostile." Aaron looked up. The boredom vanished from his face, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus Leora had seen in the interrogation room. Commander Aaron said, his voice low and urgent. "Get your men down." Thane turned to look at him. "What?" "Get them down." Before Thane could react, the ceiling panels slid open. 4 suppression turrets dropped down their barrels, rotating with a high-pitched whine. Simultaneously, the racks along the walls disengaged, releasing a swarm of spider drones, small, vicious machines designed to pacify rioters with lethal efficiency. They did not issue a warning. The Aegis Corps was done with warnings. The turrets opened fire. Chaos erupted in the confined space. Superheated plasma bolts tore through the air, screaming like banshees. 2 of the guards went down instantly, their armor smoking. Thane threw himself behind a crate, dragging Leora down with him, just as a line of fire stitched across the wall where her head had been. "We are under fire!" Thane screamed into his radio. "Friendly fire! Shut it down!" There was no answer. The shuttle spun wildly, the artificial gravity fluctuating, sending loose gear and bodies crashing against the bulkheads. Leora pressed her face against the cold metal of the deck, the heat of plasma fire singing the air above her. She saw a spider drone scuttle over the body of a fallen trooper, its optical sensor glowing a hateful red. It turned toward her, its mandibles clicking as it charged a shock bolt. She scrambled back, fumbling for the pistol of the fallen guard, but it was too far away. "Aaron!" She screamed the name tearing from her throat before she could stop it. Aaron was still seated on the bench, the magnetic cuffs, locking him to the frame. A turret swiveled toward him, locking on. He did not flinch. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, the gray was gone. His irises had shifted to a luminous, piercing silver. The air around him seemed to warp, the temperature dropping sharply. The tattoo on his arm flared, burning through the fabric of his coat like a welding torch. Aaron moved. He did not break the cuffs. He simply ignored the laws of physics that said they should hold him. He stood up, ripping the heavy steel bench, bolted to the floor, right out of the deck plating. With a roar that sounded more mechanical than human, he swung the heavy metal bench like a club. The impact shattered the turret targeting him. Metal shrapnel sprayed the room. Aaron dropped the bench and looked at the cuffs. The silver light in his eyes pulsed. The magnetic locks sparked, overloaded by a surge of bioelectric energy, pouring from his skin and popped open. He was free. Leora watched, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and awe. This was not the dry, sarcastic man who made jokes about whiskey. This was the Astra Legion. This was the monster the galaxy had nightmares about. But he was a monster with a purpose. The spider drone leaped at Leora. Aaron was there before it could land. He moved faster than Leora's eyes, could track a blur of motion that ended with him catching the drone in midair. He didn't crush it. He slammed his hand against its interface port. His fingers moved with surgical precision, jacking directly into the machine's hardware. The drone's red eye turned blue. "Protect Aaron," commanded his voice, resonating with a strange harmonic distortion. He released the drone. Instead of attacking Leora, it spun around and fired a bolt of energy at the turret, suppressing Thane, blowing it off the ceiling. Aaron moved through the chaos like a dancer. He did not fire a weapon. He did not kill the confused, terrified guards who were shooting blindly. He calculated angles. He predicted trajectories. He shoved a trooper out of the way of a falling conduit. He kicked a crate to block a spray of plasma fire aimed at Thane. He was systematically dismantling the shuttle's defenses, not with rage, but with an efficiency that was terrifying to behold. The shuttle lurched again, a violent shudder that threw everyone to the floor. "The reactor is critical," the pilot screamed over the comms. "The core is overloading the drive. It is going to detonate the ship." Aaron looked at Leora. He was breathing hard, the silver in his eyes, fading back to gray, but the intensity remained. "We need to access the main console," Aaron shouted over the din of the alarms. "We are locked out," Thane yelled back, firing his pistol at a rogue drone. "Not anymore," Aaron said. He grabbed Leora's hand. "Get me to the data port." They scrambled across the tilted deck, dodging sparks and debris. Thane provided covering fire, his loyalty to the protocol finally shattered by the realization that the protocol wanted him dead. They reached the central terminal. Aaron didn't type. He placed his palm flat against the screen. The tattoo on his arm writhed, the geometric lines expanding, flowing like liquid light across the console surface. "You are uploading," Leora realized, watching the data streams cascade down the screen. "You are not just hacking it." "I am giving it the truth," Aaron gritted out, sweat beading on his forehead. "The Aegis Corps wants to erase the file. Fine. I will give it to the whole library." The screen turned a brilliant, blinding white. For a second, the entire shuttle went silent. The drones froze mid-leap. The turrets powered down. The red alert light stopped strobing and settled into a steady, amber glow. Then, the main holographic projector in the center of the bay flickered to life. It was not a communication. It was a memory. A three-dimensional recording filled the room. It showed a battlefield, the burning surface of a colony world. Astra Legion soldiers, recognizable by their glowing armor, were holding the line against a swarm of Nixion horrors. But behind them, orbital cannons were firing, not at the enemy, at the Legion. The recording shifted. It showed a document signed by the High Council. Authorization for Purge Project Astra. Reason: asset liability exceeds strategic value. It showed Counselor Malus Dre, 15 years younger, standing over a mass grave of human soldiers, nodding to a cleaning crew. Leora covered her mouth. Thane lowered his weapon, his eyes wide. "This is what I carry," Aaron said, his voice rough. He pulled his hand back from the console. The tattoo was dim now, looking like a bruise. "It is not just a weapon code. It is the black box of the entire war. They did not just decommission us. They slaughtered us to hide the fact that they were willing to bomb their own colonies to stop the infection." Thane stared at the hologram of Dre. "I served under him," Thane whispered. "I took a medal from his hand." "He bought that medal with the blood of my squad," Aaron said softly. Suddenly, the hologram shifted. The memory vanished, replaced by the live, icy visage of the present-day Counselor Dre. The counselor was sitting in his command chair on the Vanguard. He did not look panicked. He looked annoyed, like a man dealing with a persistent pest. "Impressive," Dre said, his voice amplified through the shuttle's speakers. "I did not think a unit could override the local transport grid. You have evolved." Thane stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You betrayed them, Dre. You killed your own soldiers." "I made a calculation," Dre replied smoothly. "Peace requires sacrifice, Commander. The Astra Legion was a tool. When a tool becomes too dangerous to store, you destroy it. And now you have become dangerous too." Dre looked at Leora. "Lieutenant K. Dre said, you are a sensible woman. You have seen the evidence. You know that if this gets out, the coalition will fracture. Civil war will return. Chaos will reign. I see a murderer, Leora said, her voice ringing clear and cold. I see a necessary evil, Dre corrected. Now here is the offer. Commander Thane kills the unit. Bring me his head. If you do, I will grant you full pardons. I will blame the malfunction on a rogue AI. You can go back to your lives. And if we refuse? Thane asked, gripping his pistol. Dre sighed. Then the Vanguard will vaporize that shuttle in 60 seconds. The transmission did not cut. Dre sat there watching them waiting. Thane looked at Aaron. Aaron was leaning against the console, exhausted. The burst of energy he had used to save them had drained him. He looked at Thane, then at the gun in the commander's hand. He is right, you know, Aaron said quietly. If you kill me, you might live. Thane looked at the gun. He looked at the hologram of the man he had worshipped as a hero. Then he looked at Aaron the monster, who had just saved his life. Thane holstered his pistol. I never liked politicians, Thane growled. He turned to Leora and Aaron. Can you fly this brick? The autopilot is locked by the core, Aaron said. I can override the engine output, but I cannot steer. I need a secondary interface. Someone to handle the navigation countermeasures while I force the drive. He looked at Leora. Leora looked at the console. The restraints on Aaron's wrists were broken, but the metaphorical chains, the weight of his past, the label of weapon, were still there. He was waiting for her to make the call. She thought about her mother, the scientist who had vanished. She thought about the architect lineage warning she had seen. She realized that she was not just a witness. She was a part of this legacy. Leora stepped forward. She grabbed a heavy pry bar from the emergency kit on the wall. Raise your hands, she told Aaron. Aaron raised his wrists. Leora swung the bar, smashing the remnants of the magnetic cuffs. They clattered to the floor. You fly, Leora said, her eyes burning with a fierce new determination. I will hack the nav computer. Aaron smiled. It was a dangerous, beautiful smile. Yes, ma'am. They jumped into the pilot seats. Thane took the rear gunnery station. Hang on, Aaron shouted. He plunged his hands into the control interface. The tattoo flared white again. The shuttle groaned as the engines pushed past the red line. On the view screen, the massive shape of the Vanguard loomed. Its main cannons were charging, glowing with a deadly green light. 30 seconds to impact, Thane yelled. I am punching a hole, Aaron replied. Leora's fingers flew across the navigation keyboard. She wasn't just inputting coordinates. She was fighting the Aegis core code for code. Every time the core tried to lock the rudder, she countered with a bypass. She felt a strange sensation, a tingling in her fingertips that matched the rhythm of Aaron's tattoo. It was as if the system recognized her, as if the code Aaron carried was reaching out to her DNA. Access granted, the computer whispered in her ear. Aaron, Leora shouted. I have the shield's redirecting power to forward deflectors. Do it. The shuttle surged forward. It did not turn away from the Vanguard. It flew straight at it. Are you insane? Thane screamed. Trust me, Aaron yelled back. The Vanguard fired. A massive beam of particle energy slashed through space. Aaron banked the shuttle at the last microsecond, a maneuver that should have sheared the wings off. The beam grazed their hull, stripping away the armor plating with a screech that sounded like a dying god. Alarms screamed. Sparks showered the cockpit. But they were through. They shot past the cruiser, diving into the debris field of the station's outer ring. We are not clear yet, Leora warned. They are launching interceptors. Aaron gritted his teeth. The strain was evident on his face. Veins stood out on his neck. He was interfacing directly with the ship's drive, holding the reactor together with sheer will. Leora reached out. She placed her hand over his on the throttle. It was an instinctive gesture, but the moment her skin touched his, the energy in the cockpit stabilized. The shaking smoothed out. The engine note shifted from a scream to a roar. Aaron looked at her surprised. Together, Leora whispered. Aaron nodded. Together. They wove through the debris field, dodging wreckage and automated mines. The interceptors were fast, but Aaron was flying with the reflexes of a super soldier, and Leora was anticipating their algorithms before they could execute them. Target the relay buoy, Aaron ordered Thane. Why, Thane asked. "We are not just running," Aaron said, his eyes fixed on the stars. "We are sending a message." Thane fired the rear cannons. The communications buoy exploded, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse that blinded the Vanguard's sensors for precious seconds. Now Aaron slammed the hyperdrive lever. The stars elongated. The shuttle shook violently, threatening to tear itself apart. And then silence. The roar of the engines faded to a steady hum. The view screen shifted from the chaotic battle to the serene, swirling tunnel of hyperspace. They had escaped. Leora slumped back in her seat, her chest heaving. The adrenaline crash hit her, like a physical blow. She looked at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. Aaron let go of the console. He leaned back, closing his eyes. His skin was pale, and the tattoo was dark, completely drained of light. "We are alive," Thane's voice came from the back, sounding disbelief. Leora turned to look at Aaron. He opened his eyes and looked at her. "Nice flying, Lieutenant," he rasped. "You are not so bad yourself for a tourist," Leora replied, her voice cracking. She unbuckled her harness and leaned toward him. The space between the seats was narrow. The air was hot and smelled of burnt circuits. Aaron looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't look like a weapon or a fugitive. He looked like a man who had just found something he thought he had lost forever. He reached out his hand, trembling slightly, and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You should have stayed in the booth," Aaron whispered. Leora let out a shaky laugh. "And missed the chance to hijack a military shuttle. Not likely." She took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, and warm. She squeezed them, anchoring herself in the reality of his touch. "We are in trouble, aren't we?" she asked. Aaron squeezed back. "The biggest trouble in the galaxy." Leora looked at the hyperspace tunnel swirling outside. She thought about Counselor Dre. She thought about the lie of peace. She thought about the man sitting next to her, who had chosen to save her instead of running. She realized she didn't care about the trouble. "Where are we going?" Thane asked, walking up to the cockpit. He looked at the two of them holding hands, and for a moment, the hardened soldier softened. He looked away, giving them privacy. Aaron looked at the nav computer. "Somewhere the Aegis Corps cannot see," Aaron said. "The fringe. There is a moon there, an old repair yard. We can patch the ship." And then Leora asked. Aaron looked at her. His expression hardened, the resolve returning. "And then he said we figure out how to make them pay." Leora nodded. She didn't pull her hand away. In the quiet hum of the stolen ship speeding away from the only life she had ever known, she felt a strange sense of peace. She was a fugitive, she was a traitor. But looking at Aaron Hale, she knew she was finally on the right side of history. "So," Aaron said, breaking the heavy silence with a faint smirk. "About that whiskey I mentioned earlier." Leora laughed. It was a real laugh this time, loud and freeing. "If you do not have a bottle in that travel case," she said, "I am going to arrest you all over again." Aaron chuckled. It was a good sound. "I think," he said, looking at the stars that can be arranged. The shuttle sped on into the dark, carrying 3 fugitives, and a truth that would set the galaxy on fire. But in that moment, amidst the wreckage and the danger, there was only the warmth of a hand held in the dark and the promise of a fight worth fighting. The stolen military shuttle descended onto the surface of Oxtrad Moon like a wounded bird. Its port thruster was coughing black smoke, and the stabilizer fins were screaming against the thin, sulfurous atmosphere. This was not a place where respectable citizens of the Orion Coalition came to visit. Oxtrad was a graveyard for ships, a moon composed entirely of rust-scavenged parts, and people who did not want to be found. Aaron Hale wrestled with the flight yoke, his knuckles white. The tattoo on his arm was dormant, a dull gray tracery against his skin, but the muscles beneath it were coiled tight. "Easy," Aaron muttered to the ship. "Just hold together for another 10 seconds. Leora Cade sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands gripping the emergency restraints. She watched the ground rushing up to meet them, a landscape of jagged metal canyons and pools of stagnant coolant. "We are coming in too hot," Leora said, her voice tight. "I know," Aaron replied through gritted teeth. "The landing gear is jammed. We are going to have to slide it in." In the rear compartment, Commander Jorak Thane was bracing himself against a bulkhead, surrounded by crates of stolen munitions. "Brace for impact," Aaron shouted. The shuttle hit the ground with a bone-jarring crunch. Metal shrieked as the hull plowed through a dune of ferrous sand. Sparks showered the viewport like a chaotic firework display. The vessel slewed sideways, crushing a pile of discarded engine casings before finally grinding to a halt. Silence fell over the cockpit, heavy and absolute, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. Aaron exhaled a long breath and let go of the yoke. He looked over at Leora. "Are you in one piece?" he asked. Leora checked her limbs. She was bruised and her uniform was stained with hydraulic fluid, but she nodded. "I am fine," she said. "That was a terrible landing." Aaron unbuckled his harness, a faint smirk touching his lips. "Any landing you can walk away from is a tactical victory, Lieutenant." They blew the emergency hatch and stepped out into the biting wind of Oxtrad. The air smelled of oxidized iron and old grease. Above them, the sky was a bruised purple, dominated by the massive swirling gas giant that the moon orbited. It was a bleak, desolate place, and for three fugitives with the entire Orion coalition hunting them, it was perfect. They spent the first 6 hours camouflaging the shuttle beneath a tarp made of radar-absorbent mesh that Thane had scavenged from the cargo hold. It was grueling work. By the time they were finished, the three of them were covered in grime, exhausted, and running on nothing but adrenaline and ration bars. They found shelter in a settlement built inside the hollowed-out carcass of a dreadnought from a war that predated the Nixian conflict. The establishment was called the Broken Piston, a cantina and boarding house that smelled of stale beer and despair. Aaron secured a single room with a handful of physical credits he had stashed in his boot. Electronic transfers were impossible. The Aegis Core would track a digital transaction in seconds. Inside the cramped room, they finally allowed themselves to collapse. Thane took the chair by the door, his plasma pistol resting on his knee. Leora sat on the edge of the narrow cot, staring at her hands. Aaron stood by the viewport, watching the shadows lengthen across the scrapyard. Leora looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "We are on the news," she said softly. She gestured to the small, flickering holographic projector in the corner of the room. The volume was low, but the image was clear. It was a broadcast from the Central Citadel. Councillor Malus Dre stood on a podium flanked by the pristine white banners of the Coalition. He looked grave, authoritative, and heroic. "Citizens of the Orion Coalition," Dre's voice intoned. "Today, our security forces intercepted a terrorist cell attempting to infiltrate the Helios Spindle Station. The leader of this cell, a rogue biological experiment known as Subject Hale, is considered armed and extremely dangerous. He has seduced two of our own officers, Commander Thane and Lieutenant Cade, into his radical ideology." The image shifted to display their faces. Leora's ID photo, the one taken when she graduated from the academy, full of hope and pride, hovered next to the words, "Traitor kill on sight." Leora turned her face away. "He is good," Thane rumbled from the chair. "He sounds like a grieving father." "He is a butcher in a tailored suit," Aaron said, not turning from the window. The broadcast continued. Dre was now talking about the threat of unregulated technology and the need for stricter surveillance measures to ensure public safety. "We will find them," Dre promised the galaxy, "and we will purge this corruption." Aaron reached out and snapped the projector off. The room plunged back into shadow. "He is using us," Aaron said. "He is using this incident to tighten his grip. He will push for martial law within the week." Leora stood up. She walked over to the small sink in the corner and splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up, water dripped from her chin, but her expression had hardened. "My father died for that uniform," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He believed in the Coalition. He told me that we were the shield that protected the weak." Aaron turned to face her. "The shield was always a lie, Leora. It was just a wall to keep the people from seeing who was really running the slaughterhouse. They fell into a routine over the next 2 days. They needed to repair the shuttle's jump drive if they wanted to leave the system, and Oxtrad was the only place to find the parts without alerting the authorities." Aaron and Leora spent hours in the scrapyard hunting for a lateral induction coil compatible with a military engine. It was dangerous work. The scrapyard was patrolled by scavenger gangs and rogue drones, but Aaron moved through the wreckage with the silent grace of a ghost. On the second afternoon, they found shelter from a corrosive acid rainstorm inside the fuselage of a crashed freighter. The rain drummed rhythmically against the hull above them. Aaron was stripping the casing off a power, coupling his hands moving with mechanical precision. Leora held the light for him. "Tell me about them," Leora said suddenly. Aaron paused. "About who?" "The others. Unit 734, the ones you mentioned." Aaron worked his jaw. He resumed working, but his movements were slower. "There were 12 of us in my squad," he said. "We were not just soldiers. We were a neural network. When one of us felt pain, we all felt it. When one of us saw a sniper, we all saw the target. It was intimate in a way that normal humans cannot understand." He looked at the tattoo on his arm. Jax was the heavy weapons specialist. He wanted to be a painter. He used to sketch landscapes on the inside of his armor. Kale was the medic. He had a laugh that could rattle windows. "Mara." He stopped. "Mara," Leora prompted gently. Mara was the squad leader, Aaron said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She was the one who figured it out first. She realized the council was sending us on suicide missions, not to win battles, but to thin our numbers. She tried to organize a defect. That was when the decommission order came down. Leora shifted the light, illuminating the sharp angles of his face. "Did you love her?" she asked. Aaron looked at Leora. His gray eyes were unguarded for the first time. "We did not have the capacity for romantic love," he said. "The modifications suppressed those hormones. It was designed to keep us focused. But she was a part of me. When she died, when the Aegis Corps vented her pod, I felt a part of my own mind go dark. It was like being lobotomized." He looked down at his hands, the grease staining his skin. "For 5 years I have been trying to fill that silence," he said. "With noise, with distance, with whiskey. But the silence is always there." Leora reached out and placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm against his cold, carbon-laced flesh. "My mother vanished when I was 10, Leora said. The official report said her shuttle had an engine failure. But I remember the night before she left. She was crying. She was burning data chips in the kitchen sink. She told me that if anything happened, I was to never let them scan my blood." Aaron's hand tensed beneath hers. She knew, Leora realized. She knew about the purge. Maybe she even tried to stop it. "We are both ghosts," Aaron said, looking at their joined hands. "Leftovers from a story they tried to erase." Leora squeezed his hand. "Ghosts can be terrifying, Aaron. Especially when they start screaming." A charged silence stretched between them. It was not the forced proximity of the shuttle or the adrenaline of combat. It was a quiet recognition of shared trauma. Leora looked at his mouth, then up to his eyes. She saw the hesitation there, the fear of a man who had been built to kill, terrified that he might break the one thing he wanted to hold. Aaron pulled his hand away slowly, but not before his thumb grazed the inside of her wrist, a touch so light it shivered through her whole body. "We need to finish this coupling," he said, his voice rough. "The storm is passing." That evening, back at the broken piston, Thane was cleaning his weapon. The old commander had changed. He had traded his crisp uniform for a scavenger's leather jacket, and he had grown a stubble of gray beard. He looked less like an officer and more like the weary father figure of a dysfunctional family. He watched Aaron and Leora enter the room, noting the way they moved in sync, the unspoken communication between them. "You two look like you have been rolling in engine sludge," Thane commented. "We found the coil," Aaron said, dropping the heavy metal part on the table. "But the primary housing is cracked. It will hold for maybe 3 jumps." "3 jumps is not enough to get to the outer rim," Thane said, frowning. "We will be sitting ducks." "We are not going to the outer rim," Aaron said. Leora and Thane looked at him. Aaron walked to the center of the room. He looked tired, but there was a fire in his eyes that had not been there before. "I am done running," Aaron said. "What are you proposing?" Thane asked. Aaron pointed to the holographic projector, where the mute image of Dre was still looping on the news channel. "We have the truth," Aaron said. "In my arm. In the code. But truth is useless if nobody hears it. If we run to the rim, we survive. Maybe for a year. Maybe 10. But Dre wins. The lie becomes history. He looked at Leora. You asked me if I wanted revenge, Aaron said to her. I thought I did. I thought I wanted to find Dre and put a plasma bolt between his eyes. But that is not enough. Killing him turns him into a martyr. Then what do we do? Leora asked. We kill the lie, Aaron said. We went to the Citadel. Thane laughed, a sharp, incredulous bark. The Citadel, the headquarters of the Orion Coalition, the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy. That is suicide. It is the only place where the Aegis Corps has a hardline connection to the public broadcast grid, Aaron countered. The Central Archive. If I can jack into the mainframe there, I can upload the unredacted history of the Astra Legion directly to every screen, every datapad, every retinal display in the Coalition. I can force them to see what they did. Thane stood up, pacing the small room. It is a fortress, Hale. They have planetary shields, orbital defense platforms, thousands of drones. We have a shuttle with stolen transponder codes, Aaron said. And we have you. You know the Citadel's security protocols better than anyone. You served there for 5 years. Thane stopped pacing. He looked at the floor, wrestling with the magnitude of the request. And we have Leora, Aaron added softly. Leora looked up surprised. Me. Aaron looked at her. And for a second, a shadow crossed his face. A flicker of guilt that he quickly masked. You have a clean biosignature, he said. Or at least cleaner than mine. You can get us through the outer perimeter sensors. Leora frowned. She felt a prickle of unease. There was something he was not saying. Something about the way the system had reacted to her back at the spindle. Thane sighed, a long, rattling sound in his chest. He looked at his weapon, then at the young woman he had sworn to protect, and the soldier the system had betrayed. I swore an oath to defend the Constitution of the Coalition, Thane said quietly. Dre tore that Constitution apart. He looked up at Aaron. If we do this, Thane said, we will not come back. You know that. Even if we succeed, we die there. Aaron nodded. I know. Thane looked at Leora, Cade. Leora thought about the newsfeed. The word traitor under her face. She thought about her mother burning chips in the sink. I am in, she said. Let us go make some noise. The night before they were set to leave, the mood in the room shifted. Thane had gone to the common room of the cantina to procure a bottle of something that tasted less like fuel and more like alcohol. Aaron and Leora were alone. The lights were dimmed. Outside, the wind howled across the metal dunes of Oxtrad. Aaron was sitting on the edge of the cot, adjusting the calibration on the induction coil. Leora sat beside him, watching his hands. Aaron, she said. He did not look up. Yeah. Back at the spindle, at the security checkpoint. Aaron's hands still. You said you were just passing through, Leora said. You said it was an accident that the scanner picked you up. Aaron placed the tool down. He stared at the wall. But it was not. Was it? Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You knew the military scanners would trigger the file. You knew it would freeze the system. Aaron turned his head slowly. His expression was bleak. No, he admitted. It was not an accident. The code in my arm is designed to be aggressive. It wants to be found. I spent 5 years suppressing it. But I knew that if I ever wanted to release the data, I needed a high-level connection. Helios Spindle has a direct uplink to the core. Leora felt a cold knot in her stomach. So you used me, she said. You chose my line. You chose my shift. I chose the station, Aaron corrected. I did not know who would be in the booth. I just knew I needed a security officer to initiate the handshake protocol. He turned fully toward her. I was tired, Leora. I was tired of running. I went there hoping that maybe the system would crash and the truth would spill out. I did not expect the lockdown. I did not expect them to try and kill us immediately. And you did not expect to care, Leora said. Aaron flinched. It was a small reaction, but it told her everything. No, he said hoarsely. I did not expect you. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face. I am a weapon, Leora. That is what they made me. I calculate risks. I utilize assets. That is how I survived. But when that drone locked onto you, the calculation broke. Why, Leora asked, tears stinging her eyes. Because you were the first person in 5 years who looked at me and saw a man, not a machine, Aaron said. Even before you knew what I was. You laughed at my joke. You looked me in the eye. He touched her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I am sorry I dragged you into this, he whispered. If I could undo it, I would. I would have walked to a different line. I would have let you stay safe in your booth. Leora leaned into his touch. The anger she wanted to feel, the betrayal of being a pawn, dissolved under the raw honesty in his voice. He was a broken thing, trying to put himself back together, and somehow she had become the glue. I do not want to be safe, Leora said. I want it to be true. She closed the distance between them. The kiss was not like in the holovids. It was desperate tasting of cheap alcohol and fear. It was the collision of two people, standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding to jump together. Aaron's arms went around her, pulling her close, as if he could shield her from the entire galaxy with his body alone. His strength was terrifying, but his touch was incredibly gentle. For a moment, the war, the Aegis Corps, and the looming suicide mission to the Citadel faded away. There was only the heat of his skin, the beat of his heart against hers, and the silent promise that whatever happened tomorrow, they would face it as one. But as Leora pulled back, resting her forehead against his, she did not see the shadow that lingered in Aaron's eyes. He held her, stroking her hair, but his mind was racing. He had told her part of the truth. He had admitted to targeting the station, but he had not told her the rest. He had not told her that the code in his arm had a secondary lock, a lock that required a specific genetic key to open, a key that belonged to the bloodline of the architect who designed the Astra Legion. He had not told her that he had chosen her line specifically because his scanner had detected her DNA markers from across the hall. He had not told her that in order to upload the truth at the Citadel, he would need to plug her into the machine, and he did not know if the process would kill her. I love you, Leora, whispered the words, slipping out into the darkness. Aaron closed his eyes, tight, a spasm of pain crossing his face that she could not see. I know, he thought. And that is why what I have to do next is going to break us both. We should sleep, Aaron said aloud, his voice thick with emotion. We have a long flight tomorrow. He laid back on the narrow cot, pulling her down with him. Leora curled against his chest, listening to the steady, slow rhythm of his artificial heart. She fell asleep, thinking that the worst was over, that they were partners in this fight. Aaron stayed awake, watching the rusty ceiling of the room, listening to the wind howl, and hating himself for the soldier he could not stop being. The next morning, Oxtrad was shrouded in a heavy sulfur fog. The shuttle sat on the launch pad, its engines humming with a renewed, albeit rough, vigor. The new induction coil was welded in place. Thane was in the pilot's seat running the pre-flight check. Systems are green, Thane reported. Or as green as they are going to get. The stealth coating on the hull is degrading, but it should get us past the outer buoys. Aaron sat at the tactical station, loading the data spikes they had prepared. Leora was strapped into the co-pilot chair. She looked rested, her face set with grim determination. She looked at Aaron and smiled, a small, private smile. Aaron forced himself to return it, but he felt like a traitor. Course set for the Citadel, Thane announced. ETA 6 hours. Are we ready? Leora asked. Aaron looked at the tattoo on his arm. It was pulsing rhythmically, sensing the proximity of the conflict to come. No, Aaron said, but we are going anyway. Thane pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle lifted off the rusty ground of Oxtrad, shaking off the dust of the border world. It turned its nose toward the galactic core, toward the pristine, shining Citadel, where the Council sat on their thrones of lies. Aaron watched the stars streak past as they entered hyperspace. He checked the hidden file in his neural interface, the one labeled Protocol Architect. He looked at Leora's profile, illuminated by the blue light of the jump. Forgive me, he thought. The shuttle vanished into the void, racing toward the end of the world. The Citadel was not a planet. It was a monument built from white marble and durasteel, floating in the exact center of the Orion Coalition's territory. It was a Dyson swarm of administrative rings, data spires, and luxury habitats orbiting a star that had been artificially stabilized to burn with a perfect golden light. It was beautiful, imposing, and utterly terrifying to the three people currently riding a service elevator up the spine of the Central Archive Tower. They were dressed in the gray, grease-stained jumpsuits of the Sanitation and Maintenance Guild. Commander Jorak Thane pulled at his collar, looking miserable. The fake mustache he had glued to his upper lip was threatening to peel off in the humidity of the shaft. "I look ridiculous," Thane grumbled. "I commanded a battle station for 10 years. Now I am a janitor named Bordeaux." "You look like a very authoritative janitor," Leora Cade said, checking the charge on the data spike, hidden in her tool belt. "Just remember to complain about the ventilation. Nobody looks at a maintenance worker who is complaining." Aaron Hale stood by the elevator controls. He was silent, his eyes fixed on the floor indicator as it ticked upward. Floor 400. Floor 401. The archive was at the summit floor, 500. Aaron, Leora said softly. He flinched, just slightly. He looked at her, and for a moment the confident mask of the infiltration specialist slipped. He looked sick. "We are close," Aaron said. His voice was tight. "Are you sure the code will hold?" Leora asked. "The biometric spoofers." "The Aegis Corps is looking for a soldier and 2 fugitives," Aaron replied. "It is not looking for 3 people here to fix a hydraulic leak in the server cooling system. We are invisible." He did not sound convinced. He sounded like a man walking to the gallows. The elevator shuddered and slowed. A chime sounded cheerful and polite. "Floor 500. Central Archive. Restricted access. Please present clearance." Thane stepped forward. He held up a stolen maintenance badge to the scanner. "Sanitation." Thane barked, channeling every ounce of his command experience into the role of a grumpy laborer. "We have a work order for the coolant flush. Unless you want your precious servers to overheat and melt the history of the Third Era, open the door." The scanner buzzed. A red light swept over them. "Authorization confirmed. Entry granted. Please minimize disruption." The heavy blast doors hissed open. They stepped out into a cathedral of data. The Central Archive was a cavernous hall, the ceiling lost in shadow. Rows of towering server monoliths stretched into the distance, humming with the collective knowledge of 1,000 worlds. The air was freezing, kept chilled to protect the delicate quantum processors. In the center of the room, suspended above a raised platform, was a massive rotating sphere of light. The avatar of the Aegis Corps. "It is quiet," Thane whispered, his hand drifting instinctively to the concealed plasma pistol at his hip. "Too quiet." "They are arrogant," Aaron said, walking toward the central platform. "They believe this place is untouchable. They believe the lie so much that they do not think anyone would dare challenge it." They reached the primary interface console. It was a sleek slab of obsidian glass reflecting their distorted faces. Aaron took a breath. He removed his heavy work gloves. He unbuttoned the sleeve of his jumpsuit, revealing the tattoo. It was no longer gray. It was pulsing with a violent, angry violet light. "Thane, watch the door," Aaron ordered. Thane nodded and moved to the perimeter, taking cover behind a data stack. Leora stood beside Aaron. She felt a strange vibration in her teeth, a resonance that seemed to be coming from the console itself. "Ready?" she asked. Aaron looked at her. He looked at her for a long, agonizing second. He looked like he wanted to say something, to scream something, but he swallowed it down. "Ready," he said. He slammed his tattooed forearm onto the obsidian surface. The reaction was instantaneous. The sphere of light above them flared, turning from a gentle gold to a harsh, blinding red. The hum of the servers rose to a shriek. "Security breach," the room announced. "Unauthorized interface detected." Aaron did not pull away. He gritted his teeth, the veins in his neck standing out as he forced the connection. "I am uploading the payload," Aaron shouted over the noise. "I am forcing the handshake." On the obsidian screen, text began to scroll. It was the same red text Leora had seen at the space station, but this time it was moving faster, fighting against the intrusion. "Military file above clearance. Access denied. Countermeasures engaged." Aaron groaned. His knees buckled, but he held his arm in place. "It is fighting me," he yelled. "The encryption is evolving. I cannot break the final firewall." Leora grabbed his shoulder. "You can do it, Aaron. You broke the shuttle's drive. You can break this." "No." Aaron gasped, sweat dripping from his nose. "It is not a strength issue. It is a key issue. I have the data, but I do not have the admin rights to publish it. The system needs a secondary authorization. The screen flashed. A new message appeared, burning in white letters that seemed to sear Leora's retinas. Secondary key required. Protocol architect. Awaiting lineage confirmation. Leora froze. Lineage confirmation. She stared at the words. She remembered the warning on the shuttle. Architect lineage. Aaron, Leora whispered. What is that? Aaron did not look at her. He was staring at the screen, his face a mask of misery. Aaron, what is that? Put your hand on the panel, Aaron said. His voice was hollow. It sounded dead. Why, Leora asked, stepping back. Leora, please, Aaron begged, turning his head to look at her. His eyes were desperate. We do not have time. Put your hand on the panel. Leora looked at his arm locked to the machine. She looked at the red light bathing the room. She looked at the words. Architect. She stepped forward. Slowly terrified, she placed her hand on the obsidian glass next to Aaron's arm. The machine went silent. The red light vanished. A soft blue pulse rippled out from under Leora's palm. It traveled up the console, into the floating sphere above. Identity confirmed, the system spoke. The voice was not the harsh robotic tone of the Aegis Core. It was a woman's voice. Soft, familiar. Welcome, daughter. Leora snatched her hand back as if she had been burned. She stumbled, clutching her chest. She knew that voice. She had not heard it in 15 years, but she knew it. Mother, she whispered. The screen changed. The red warnings dissolved. In their place, a file directory appeared. It was vast. It was comprehensive. And at the top, a video file began to play automatically. It was a recording of a woman in a lab coat. She looked tired. She looked hunted. She had Leora's eyes. My name is Dr. Alara Cade, the woman in the video said. If you are seeing this, then I am dead. And if the system has unlocked it, means my daughter is alive. It means she found the carrier. Leora stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face. I helped build them, her mother's recording continued. The Astra Legion. We thought we were saving humanity. We made them strong. We made them connected. But the Council, they fear what they cannot control. They are going to kill them. All of them. I have hidden the truth in the only place the Council cannot scrub. I have hidden the master key in my own bloodline. The woman in the video leaned closer to the camera. Leora, my sweet girl. I am sorry to burden you with this, but you are the failsafe. The soldier carries the story. You carry the voice. Only together can you speak. The recording ended. Leora stood in the silence, her heart shattering in her chest. She turned slowly to face Aaron. He had disconnected his arm. He was standing there, rubbing the tattoo. He would not meet her eyes. You knew, Leora said. Her voice was nice. Aaron flinched. You knew, she repeated louder this time. Back at the station. You did not just pick a random line, you scanned me. Aaron nodded. Yes. You knew my mother was an architect. You knew I was the key. Yes. Leora felt the betrayal like a physical knife in her gut. It twisted sharp and cold. Everything Leora choked out. The shuttle. The escape. The kiss on the moon. Was any of it real? Or was I just a tool? Was I just a sophisticated wrench you needed to open a door? Aaron looked up then. His eyes were tormented. I came for the wrench, he said softly. I stayed for the woman. Do not lie to me, Leora screamed. The sound echoed through the vast archive. You used me. You manipulated me from the moment we met. You put a target on my back because you needed my DNA. I needed to save my people, Aaron shouted back, stepping toward her. I spent 5 years watching my friends die in accidents. I spent 5 years listening to the galaxy call us monsters. I had a duty to clear their names. Yes, I sought you out. Yes, I used you. But Leora. He reached for her. She slapped his hand away. Don't touch me, she hissed. Aaron froze. He looked at his hand, then let it drop to his side. You are right, he said quietly. You have every right to hate me. I am a weapon. I completed my mission. But the kiss was not the mission. Before Leora could answer, the air in the room shimmered. A massive holographic projection materialized above the central platform. It was Counselor Malus Dre. But this was not a recording. This was a live feed projected directly from his secure bunker deep within the citadel. And beside him, a towering avatar of pure light formed. The visual representation of the Aegis core itself. "Bravo," Dre said slowly, clapping his hands. A touching family reunion. Thane popped up from behind the data stack, leveling his pistol at the hologram. "Step away from the console," Thane shouted. "Putting the toy away," Commander Dre sneered. "You cannot shoot a photon." Dre looked down at Leora and Aaron. He looked regal, calm, and utterly in control. "So the architect's daughter returns," Dre mused. Alara was a brilliant woman. Foolish, sentimental, but brilliant. She thought she could outsmart the necessity of order. "You murdered her," Leora said, wiping her tears. "You killed her to hide your crimes." "I removed an obstacle to peace," Dre corrected. "Just as I am about to remove you." The Aegis core avatar pulsed. "System lock initiated, purge sequence ready." "You cannot purge this," Aaron said, stepping between Leora and the hologram. "We are in the root directory. If you fire on the servers, you wipe the entire coalition database. You destroy the economy. You destroy the navigation grid. You send the galaxy back to the Stone Age." Dre smiled, a cold, thin smile. "I do not need to destroy the servers, Unit 734. I only need to convince your partner not to press the button." Dre turned his gaze to Leora. "Lieutenant Cade, look at what you are holding. That file contains the truth about the Astra Legion, yes. But it also contains the truth about the colonies we sacrificed. It contains the names of the millions we left to die, so the core worlds could survive. If you release that file," Dre continued, his voice dropping to a persuasive purr, "you do not just clear a few soldiers' names. You destroy the faith of the entire galaxy. The riots will be instantaneous. The outer worlds will declare war on the core. The economy will collapse. Famine will follow. Billions will die in the chaos." He leaned forward, his holographic eyes boring into hers. "Is that what you want, Leora? Do you want to be the person who burned the galaxy down just to prove a point? Or do you want peace?" Leora looked at the console. Her hand hovered over the command prompt. "Execute upload." "It is a lie," Leora whispered. "Your peace is a lie." "It is a stable lie," Dre countered. "It is a lie that keeps children fed. It is a lie that keeps the trade routes open." "Close that file, Lieutenant. Walk away. I will give you a new life. I will give Aaron a pardon. He can live out his days in a garden world. You can be together. No more running." Leora looked at Aaron. Aaron was watching her. He looked tired. So incredibly tired. He looked at the button that would vindicate his squad, the button he had spent 5 years running toward. Then he looked at Leora. "Don't do it for me," Aaron said softly. Leora blinked. "What?" "Dre is right," Aaron said. "If you press that, chaos follows. I wanted justice. But I am just a soldier. I do not have to live with the consequences of the world I break. You do." He stepped back. He moved his hand away from the console. "I lied to you," Aaron said. "I used you. I do not deserve your loyalty. If you want to take the deal, if you want to save the peace, I will not stop you." Leora stared at him. He was giving her the choice. He was sacrificing his vindication, his life's purpose, to give her the agency he had stolen from her. She looked at Dre. The counselor looked smug. He thought he had won. He thought that fear of chaos would always outweigh the need for truth. She looked at the screen. She thought of her mother. "You are the failsafe." "My mother did not hide this key because she wanted chaos." Leora said, her voice gaining strength. "She hid it because she knew that a foundation built on corpses would eventually collapse on its own." She looked at Aaron. "You lied to me, Aaron Hale, and I will never forget that. But you are not the monster here." She turned to Dre. "The monster is the man who thinks the truth is too dangerous for the people he rules." Leora raised her hand. "No," Dre screamed, his composure shattering. "Aegis, kill them." Leora slammed her hand onto the execute command. The room exploded with light. It was not an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of data. The rotating sphere above them shattered into a billion fragments of pure information. The servers howled as the bandwidth spiked to infinity. Every screen on the Citadel turned white. Every datapad in the Orion Coalition pinged. Every newsfeed, every traffic controller, Every personal device in 1,000 systems received a priority file. Subject: the Astrolegion. Status: unredacted. The hologram of Dre flickered and distorted. He screamed in silent rage as his connection was flooded with the evidence of his own crimes. "Run!" Thane shouted. "Security is breaching the door." The blast doors groaned as cutting lasers began to slice through the metal. Aaron grabbed Leora's hand. Not the hand she had used to upload the file. The other one. "We have to go to the roof," Aaron yelled. "The maintenance extraction point." They ran. They ran through the freezing aisles of the archive as the Aegis core screamed around them, its logic loops fracturing under the weight of the truth. They burst out onto the roof of the spire just as the security drones swarmed the platform. The wind whipped at their jumpsuits. Below them, the perfect city of the Citadel was in chaos. Lights were flickering. Sirens were wailing. Ships were veering off course as their navigation computers processed the new data. There, Thane pointed. A small, battered repair skiff was hovering near the edge of the landing pad. It was the extraction vehicle Aaron had programmed to meet them. They sprinted for it. Plasma bolts sizzled past their ears. A drone clipped Thane in the shoulder, spinning him around. Commander, Leora screamed. Thane grunted, clutching his shoulder, but he kept moving. Aaron grabbed him by the harness and hauled him into the skiff. Leora jumped in behind them. Aaron punched the throttle. The skiff dropped off the edge of the tower, like a stone, diving into the traffic lanes of the chaotic city. Behind them, the central archive tower was glowing. Not with searchlights, but with the sheer energy of the transmission. It was a beacon, broadcasting the sins of the fathers to the children of the galaxy. 3 weeks later, the galaxy did not end, but it did change. The Dre leak, as the news feeds called it, had shattered the High Council. Malus Dre was in custody, awaiting trial for crimes against humanity and sentient rights violations. The Aegis Corps had been taken offline for a comprehensive ethical restructure. Riots had happened. There was anger, there was confusion, but there was also something else. People were watching the footage of the Astrolegion. They saw the soldiers holding the line against the Nixion swarm. They saw them saving colonies that the Council had written off. They saw Aaron Hale fighting to protect a security officer in a shuttle. They did not see monsters. They saw saviors who had been betrayed. On a quiet, uncharted moon in the Veyron Nebula, a small ship sat on a ridge overlooking a sea of violet gas. Leora Cade sat on the loading ramp watching the nebula swirl. She wore a simple flight jacket, the patches stripped off. She held a cup of coffee that was actually hot, a luxury she was still getting used to. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Aaron walked down the ramp. He looked different. The heavy coat was gone. He wore a mechanic's shirt, his sleeves rolled up. The tattoo on his arm was dark, quiet. "Thane is on the comms," Aaron said, sitting down beside her. "He says the interim government has officially offered the amnesty deal. Full pardons for all surviving legionnaires. They want us to help train the new defense forces." "Are you going to take it?" Leora asked. Aaron shook his head. "No. I am done being a soldier. I think I would make a terrible instructor anyway." Lesson 1, throw a bench at the turret. Leora smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "What about you?" Aaron asked. "Thane says they would reinstate you, with a promotion, Captain Cade. It has a nice ring to it." Leora looked at the coffee in her hands. "I spent my whole life believing in a system that lied to me," she said. "I think I am done with systems for a while. Besides, I have a pilot who is terrible at navigation. He needs someone to read the maps." Aaron looked at her. The tension that had been between them since the archive, the guilt, the anger was still there, but it was softer now. It was healing. "You trust me again?" he asked quietly. Leora turned to face him. She looked at the gray eyes that had seen too much war. "I trust the man who gave me the choice," she said. "I trust the man who was willing to lose everything so I could keep my soul." She reached out and took his hand. "But if you ever scan my DNA without asking again," she added, her voice sharp, "I will shoot you out of an airlock." Aaron laughed. It was a sound of pure relief. "Understood, Lieutenant." He squeezed her hand. "So," Aaron said, looking out at the nebula, "we are fugitives with a pardon we do not want, flying a ship held together by duct tape, with no destination and no money." Leora leaned her head on his shoulder. Sounds like a plan, she said. Auron rested his head against hers. The galaxy was a mess. The truth had left scars that would take a generation to fade. But as they sat there, two small specks of life against the infinite dark, they knew one thing for certain. The Council had tried to make them machines. It had tried to make them numbers in a file. But it failed. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing humanity had ever created was not the weapon that could kill a swarm. It was the stubborn, irrational, terrifying refusal to let go of the hand of the person you loved, even when the whole universe told you to run. Auron watched the stars turn overhead. For the first time in 100 years of war and silence, the noise in his head was gone. "Ready for takeoff?" he asked. Leora smiled. "Always." The ship fired its engines a bright flare of blue against the purple sky and rose into the dark heading for the horizon, where the maps ended and the future began.